Have there been any moments that really have stuck with you while you've been, because you're also working in hospitals during your degree as well,
Yeah.
and now you're a professional doctor. Have there been any like standout moments that you remember that you were just like, wow, this is just changed the way you look at the world or changed the way you understand life? Or
I think probably loads actually. I think maybe I can't really think of any specific single moment. But one thing that is interesting that kind of the doctors in the unit one in particular is really, really good at is having discussions about discussions around end of life and what people would want toward, like, when they're nearing kind of the end of their lives, and what sort of things are maybe appropriate towards the end of their lives, in the sense of if me or you went into hospital, we would want every intervention possible to make sure that we came out of hospital alive. Like, that could lead to having machines breathe for us. Basically every intervention, we're kind of young fit people, we want to just throw the book at us to make sure that we come out and we're gonna basically survive. Whereas if you take someone who's maybe 90 years old and they've got a few other health conditions that have been grumbling in the background, and they kind of gradually been maybe moving the wrong way in terms of their health for the past 10 years, seeing conversations with those people about, is that really appropriate for you? Like, would you really want to try all of those different things? Because you also have to factor in that these are quite invasive, kind of harmful interventions that you could put someone through, and they might not actually come out the other end of it. So I think seeing the conversations about what people want towards the end of their lives has been quite a kind of powerful thing, and makes me kind of look at the world slightly differently. But of course, in each of those conversations is very individual. So I feel like that's where the kind of the art side of medicine comes in. There's very much a strong science part of medicine, but having those conversations is very much an art. And I've seen some people do it really, really well. And I've seen some people do it what I would think is quite poorly, and the discussion has almost been emotionally harmful for the other person. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest things I've noticed since actually starting the job.
And so how do you think, what have you learned about navigating that?
I think there's one thing that it was during a random tutorial in second year that was nothing to do with this at all, but we had a really, really good doctor who he just mentioned kind of, it was a bit of a different topic, but it was talking about trying to change someone's mind, which is a really big thing you kind of try and do in medicine. You talk about it a lot in terms of trying to stop people from drinking too much, or trying to stop people from smoking, kind of like the phases of changing someone's mind. One of the things he mentioned that is, if you really, really want to change someone's mind, it starts off by just planting a seed. And you don't actually go in 100% and be like, you've got to do this, this, and this because of this, this, and that, because people it's not going to resonate with anyone. They're just going to become defensive, standoffish. Whereas if you kind of just open the conversation up, let it settle, let people think about it, they're usually a lot more amenable to further discussions.
So what does it mean to plant a seed? How might you navigate that?
So I think it depends on the situation, and I've heard like loads of kind of good language used, and a lot of the times you hear something that someone else says and you kind of like, oh, I like that, I'm gonna use that when I'm speaking to someone. So it might be someone comes in, maybe it is this 90-year-old person. The conversation might be something along the lines of kind of, have you thought about how you would want things to go if you were to get worse? So say it's someone, they're 90, they're probably going to get home, they're going to be fine, but they've been in hospital a couple times and they're most likely going to be in hospital again. So you might plant the seed of just kind of mentioning, have you thought about these sort of things? Have you thought about what you would want further down the line? And this is usually kind of related to discussions about, if someone's heart were to stop, would you want them to kind of undergo CPR, which can be a very kind of damaging thing. You're obviously doing the compressions on the chest, which can kind of break ribs, and a lot of people don't really do too well after they've had that sort of thing done. Now, you might not jump straight into that sort of conversation, but you might just start getting them to think about it, like what sort of things would you want and what sort of things would you not want, so that if they were to come into hospital again later down the line and they were more unwell the next time they came into hospital, and someone maybe brings up that discussion again, at least it's not the first time that's been brought up. It's kind of good to have these conversations early when someone's well and they're able to think it through, rather than if someone comes in and they're really, really unwell, then it can be quite stressful to start talking about these sorts of things then rather than earlier on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's made me think of two things there. One, also absolutely milking this work experience that when I was in high school. But it was exactly what you said. I also was shadowing a cardiologist for a day. And that was exactly the conversation we had. He was like, I've got sometimes patients in their 80s. If they go into cardiac arrest, you know, you have to do not resuscitate.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that we need to be having these conversations about dying, because so often or sometimes it happens that he has, especially families,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll be like, we have this very old woman that then they want me to go and do CPR or whatever, and as you say, break ribs, and you know, you might buy a few more months, maybe another year, but you've also fractured all the ribs, you know, like, I don't know, you maybe, you know, damaged their sternum, just like their whole chest cavity under an immense amount of pressure, to buy a bit more time in intensive care sometimes.
And then what quality of life do they have in those few extra months?
Exactly. And surely they'd be in agony as well after they woke up, if they did survive. And it does seem downstream of maybe a bit of an inability for us to talk candidly about death.
I was
dying.
gonna bring that up, when you said that.
Yeah, because the second thing I was gonna say was that you gave me a book for my birthday, which was a few weeks ago, and it was Being Mortal by Atul Gawande.
Yeah.
Why did you give me that? Why did you think I should read that?
So I think maybe everyone has, sometimes they have books they read which kind of really change how they look at certain things. And I read Being Mortal for the first time during medical school, and it kind of just like fundamentally changed how I look at basically how you should think about life, death, and everything in between. I think it kind of made me recognise that we're not very good at talking about death in the UK. It's not really something we kind of talk about openly in our culture, and we tend to shy away from the conversation. It's almost like a taboo subject that people don't even want to engage in the topic, which I think only really leads to harm. I can't really think of any reason why that would be beneficial, apart from maybe in the short term where you get to avoid the kind of emotional harm from having the discussion. But unfortunately, we have to have difficult conversations. It always makes things better in the long term. But in terms of why I thought you should read it, is I think just some of the ideas kind of challenge a lot of the ways we think about things, and I know you're someone who always likes to come across new ideas that challenge current ways of thinking. But yeah, it was a great book that I think I would recommend everyone reading, but especially everyone in healthcare. I think it's very eye-opening, and it gives a very fresh perspective and healthy perspective on how we look at death and dying.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Cried multiple times reading it. It's so emotional, man. It was just so human, and he's writing about his dad, and Atul Gawande. I've also read the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande, so already a fan. He's a brilliant writer, great storyteller. But I think Being Mortal was definitely better. You said that you thought it was one of his best books.
It's my favourite one so far. Yeah, I've not managed to read too many more of the other ones, but yeah, it was great.
It was so, and it's just such an important. I mean, death is, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Everybody in this room is going to die, and everybody listening to this podcast is going to die as well. All four of them. Yeah. But hi, Mum.
Iffy.
But yeah, it is something that's come from, and for our relatives and our families and our nearest and dearest and everyone. But as you say, and I feel like death is we're so separated from it as well, because it is something that happens in hospitals. It's something that happens. It's what we often don't see it. Whereas in a lot of other cultures, like in Eastern cultures, they'll spend time with the body. You'll cremate your family members. I've never seen a dead body, like a dead human body. I was thinking about that the other day. that's probably quite unusual. I reckon most humans throughout history would probably have seen other dead humans, or at least come in contact with them.
Yeah. I think, making the comparison to Eastern cultures seems very appropriate. I remember visiting Nepal, and you would go to temples where they would kind of routinely they would float the dead bodies kind of down the river or bathe them in the river, whereas you would never see that in the UK or even in kind of more Western cultures. So maybe I don't think it's not unusual here, but it's maybe unusual in the kind of grand scheme of human existence to have not seen a dead body. One thing you made me think of there is we don't like talking about death, but we also maybe don't try and think of the idea of having a good death and what does like a good death look like. One thing that comes up quite often in hospital-based conversations is, where do you want to die? That can be it's a very, very important thing for a lot of people. Like, do you want to die in your own home? Or do you want to die in a hospice? Or do you want to die here in the ward where you're quite comfortable, you know a lot of the different members of staff? And that could all contribute towards someone having a good death. Because I think we could all maybe think in our head, if you thought in your head the idea of a bad death, it'll be different for everyone, but you probably have some kind of images or things that jump to mind. But we usually only think of, oh, that was a bad way to go. But we don't think in the flip side of what would be a good way to go.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, 100%. Because that is one thing that Asa Gwandi was writing in that book, was that, yeah, where do you want to die? Like, what, and what who do you want to have with you, and what would your I know it's good to think about. Just because we're young doesn't mean we What do you think is
the ripe old age of 27? Like,
well, what do you think is a good way to die? Like, what's the?
I suppose it's just like, I don't know, when you hear of people like, oh, they passed away in their own home, surrounded by the people they care about, and they passed away comfortably, not in pain, not in discomfort. You're like, oh, you really ask for much more than that? Like, that sounds. I don't want to be like, that sounds pretty good to me, but like, it does sound like a good, good death. Yeah.
Yeah, in comfort and surrounded by your loved ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was another thing that Asa Gwandi was saying in that book, was that it's like, if you can have these conversations, these difficult conversations, then you can make a plan.
Yeah.
And then you can make it peaceful and far less painful. And because I thought it was a great thing you said about the science, but also the art of medicine. And what Gwandi was saying was, if you just apply the science, it's like we have an unbelievable number of tools which can prolong life.
Yeah.
But should we also be asking, should we actually be prolonging life?
Well, that's like the conversation around lifespan and health span. So before, medicine was all about prolonging lifespan. People are living longer, great. We're living till we're in our 80s, 90s, fantastic. Whereas you might get an extra 10 years from the interventions you put in place, but if you spend all 10 of those years with a massively reduced quality of life and a huge burden of disease, is it worth it? I mean, I suppose that's up to the individual in each individual circumstance, but I think we should be focusing on not necessarily trying to make people live longer, but to live healthier for longer, even if they end up dying at the same age.